Move, you worthless ghetto trash. Richard Sterling's hand cracks across Dorothy Washington's face. She is 72 years old. The elderly woman's coffee cup flies from her hand. It hits the diner floor and shatters into 1,000 tiny pieces. Every single customer in the diner freezes. Forks stop halfway to mouths. Conversations die. Then one by one cell phones emerge from pockets. Red recording lights blink on. Dorothy Washington touches her burning, stinging cheek. Her glasses are crooked, but she does not cry. Not one tear. Her steady, clear eyes meet Richard Sterling's angry glare. And she is not afraid. Something in her calm, quiet power makes him feel strange. It makes him unsettled. But the feeling passes. Sterling straightens his expensive, silk tie. He looks at her on the floor. He is satisfied. He has put a nobody in her place. But Dorothy Washington is not a nobody. You can see it in the way the other customers look at her. They look at her with pure respect. They are angry for her. Richard Sterling has no idea what he has just done. He has no idea what he has just set in motion. Because Dorothy has a son. And when her son, Vincent Washington, learns what happened to his mother today, Richard Sterling's comfortable, rich, and powerful world will begin to crumble. It will fall apart in ways he never, ever imagined possible. Have you ever watched someone destroy their entire future with just one moment of pure, stupid arrogance? Stay with us. Dorothy Washington's morning routine never changed. It was the same every single day. At 6:30 a.m. sharp, she would rise from her bed. Her apartment was modest. It was small, but it was clean and bright. Sunlight filtered in through the white lace curtains. They were curtains she had sewn with her own hands 40 years ago. Her small home was not filled with expensive things. Instead, it was filled with a lifetime of careful choices. It was filled with love. On the mantel, above a small fireplace, were the family photos. They were arranged perfectly. Each one told a story. There were fresh flowers in a small vase, right from her own window garden. The shelves were lined with books. Hundreds of books. They were old books with worn-out covers. They spoke of a smart, educated mind. The photographs told deliberate stories. There was a photo of a young Dorothy in a cap and gown. She was clutching her PhD in education. She had been a teacher for over 50 years. She had taught thousands of children. There was another photo. It was Dorothy with Samuel, her late husband. They were dancing at their anniversary party. Samuel had been gone for 10 years now. Oh, how she missed him. She missed his laugh. She missed the way he held her hand. And then there was the most important photo. It was the one right in the center. It was a recent picture of her son, Vincent. In the photo, Vincent was at a fancy dinner. He was wearing a black tuxedo that cost more than her rent for a whole year. He was always in expensive suits. He was always at charity events or big business meetings. In every photo, Vincent looked powerful. He looked like he commanded respect from every single person around him. Her neighbors in the apartment building knew Vincent was successful. Very, very successful. He must be a big-time banker, Dorothy, her neighbor Mrs. Brown would say. No, no, Mr. Henderson from downstairs would argue. He's a politician. I can see it. He's got that look. Dorothy always just smiled. She kept the details vague. She did not want to worry them. Oh, he's just in business, she would say, her voice full of a mother's pride. He has important meetings. He has very significant responsibilities. She would just say he had the kind of work that required expensive suits and private cars. That was all she said. She never told them what his business really was. At precisely 8 a.m. her phone rang. It was the same time every day. She smiled, picking it up. She settled into her favorite chair, the one with the soft, worn-out cushions. Morning, Ma. Sleep well? Vincent's voice. It was deep and strong. But when he spoke to his mother, it was filled with a warmth that was reserved only for her. Dorothy smiled. Her whole day was better already. Like a baby sweetheart. How is work treating you? Are you working too hard? She heard him sigh on the other end. Can't complain, Ma. Business is business. You know how it is. Just putting out fires. You have plans today? He asked. I do, she said brightly. I'm having lunch with Helen at Rosie's. It's our usual Tuesday tradition. There was a pause on the line. Vincent always worried about her. He always worried about her venturing out into the city alone. Dorothy never understood why. This neighborhood was her home. It was perfectly safe. It was filled with people who had known her for decades. Ma, Vincent said, his voice hesitant. You know, I could arrange something nicer. I can get you a private dining room at the Savoy. They have proper service staff. Places that are more suited to someone of your standing, Ma. You deserve the best. Dorothy chuckled. It was a warm, gentle sound. Vincent Washington, I raised you better than that, she scolded him softly. Good people matter more than fancy places. And Rosie's Diner has both. It has good food and it has good hearts. I don't need fancy, Vincent. I have good. He sighed again. He knew he couldn't win this argument. He never could. Yes, ma'am, he said. You're right. Just be careful out there, okay? Please. For me. People aren't always what they seem. Not everyone is good like you are. I'll be fine, baby. You worry too much about your old mother. I'm a tough old bird. It's my job to worry, he said. The warmth was back. I'm the only one I've got. Love you, Ma. I love you too, sweetheart. Have a good day at work. You too, Ma. The call ended. It was abrupt. Vincent never lingered on phone calls, not even with family. Dorothy understood. Successful men operated on tight schedules. She imagined he had important decisions waiting. He had crucial meetings that needed his full attention. She had no idea what those meetings were really about. Across the city, Richard Sterling's morning was very, very different. His office was not a small apartment. His office was a penthouse. It took up the entire 42nd floor of the most prestigious, most expensive tower in downtown. The windows were not windows. They were walls of glass. They went from the floor all the way to the ceiling. From here, Richard Sterling had a commanding view of the entire financial district spreading out below him. He looked down on everyone. The floors were not wood. They were Italian marble, so shiny you could see your face in them. They reflected the light from giant crystal chandeliers. The leather furniture in his office cost more than most families earned in an entire year. Sterling stood at those giant windows. He stood like a general looking over a territory he had conquered. His own reflection stared back at him. He saw his perfectly styled hair. He saw his hand-tailored suit, which cost $10,000. He saw his gold Rolex watch catching the morning light. Every single detail of Richard Sterling was calculated. It was all planned. It was all designed to project one thing: superiority, dominance, untouchable success. His assistant, Jennifer, walked up to him. She was hesitant. She was walking on eggshells. She knew Sterling's moods could shift. He could be calm one second and violent and angry the next. Sir? Your 10 a.m. appointment files are ready, she said, her voice small. And Mrs. Carter called. She was requesting to reschedule her consultation. Sterling's face darkened immediately. He turned from the window. Mrs. Carter? He sneered. You mean that woman with the thick, ugly accent? The one who can barely string together two coherent English sentences? Tell people like her to master basic communication before they waste my valuable time. Jennifer flinched. Sir, I looked her up. She actually speaks 5 languages fluently. She runs 3 successful tech companies. Her portfolio it's quite impressive. Sterling's eyes went cold. I don't care if she runs 50 companies, he hissed. Image matters. This profession. Jennifer. My reputation depends on maintaining the appropriate clientele. We serve the right kind of people. People who belong in places like this. People who understand quality and class. This was Richard Sterling's carefully built universe. In his world, success was measured by how many people you could dismiss. It was measured by how many people you could call inferior. His power was defined by never, ever having to think about anyone else's struggles. He never thought about their dreams. He never thought about their basic humanity. He had built his entire career on this idea. He was a lawyer, yes, but he was a special kind of lawyer. He was the lawyer that rich corporations hired when they were being sued for discrimination. When they were sued for not hiring people because of their race. When they were sued for firing people for being different. Richard Sterling was the man they hired to make sure the powerful remained untouchable. He was the man they hired to make sure the vulnerable stayed crushed. His phone buzzed. It was a news notification. He looked at it. A video of a police brutality protest was going viral. He scrolled past it. Another notification. An investigative report. It was about systemic racism in hiring practices. He scrolled past it. Another one. A congressional hearing on hate crimes. Sterling scrolled past every single story. He did it with practiced indifference. He just did not care. These were not his problems. These problems belonged to other people. People whose whole existence, he believed, was completely irrelevant to his continued success. He was wrong. Meanwhile, back in Dorothy's neighborhood, Rosie's diner was buzzing. It was getting ready for another busy lunch service. The diner was run by a woman named Maria Santos. She had inherited the establishment from her father. She was continuing 3 decades of serving the neighborhood with genuine warmth. This place was the heart of the community. Construction workers, covered in dust, grabbed a quick breakfast before heading to their job sites. Office employees escaped their sterile, boring corporate cafeterias. They came here for real conversation and for real homemade food. And then there were the regulars. The elderly folks who had been coming to Rosie's since the doors first opened 30 years ago. And among these regulars, Dorothy Washington was the unofficial queen. She was neighborhood royalty. Every Tuesday at noon she would arrive. She would be with her best friend, Helen Morrison, from their church. They always sat in the same corner booth. They always had the same gentle orders. Dorothy always had the grilled cheese and a small cup of tomato soup. They had the same conversations. And somehow their quiet, gentle talking made everyone else in the diner feel more peaceful, just by being near them. Maria, the owner, always prepared for them specially. Table 6 was cleaned twice. She put out the good china, not the chipped ones. She put out fresh, clean napkins. And she always put a small arrangement of flowers in a little vase. This respect. It wasn't a business strategy. It wasn't fake. It was earned. It was earned through years and years of Dorothy's quiet kindness. It was earned because Dorothy had a mysterious, strange ability to solve impossible problems for families who were struggling. Nobody in the neighborhood ever forgot. When Maria's own father had a terrible stroke, Maria was falling apart. She didn't know what to do. Dorothy organized everything. She organized meal deliveries to the hospital. She organized visits. She sat with Maria's mother for hours, just holding her hand. And 5 years ago, when the diner was facing eviction, a big, mean corporate developer had bought the building. They were going to kick Maria out. They were going to tear the diner down and build luxury condos. Maria was in tears. She was going to lose her family's legacy. Dorothy just looked at the legal papers. She frowned. She said, "Let me make a phone call. My son Vincent, he knows some very smart people in business." The very next day, a lawyer showed up at the diner. A lawyer in a suit that was even more expensive than Richard Sterling's. This lawyer handled everything. He found loopholes. He filed injunctions. He fought the big developer in court. And he won. He saved Rosie's diner. And when Maria tried to pay him, when she offered him all her savings, the lawyer just smiled. He put his hands up. "No, ma'am. No payment is needed." Maria was confused. But who are you? How can I thank you?" The lawyer adjusted his tie. "My employer just asks that you continue to make Mrs. Washington's favorite grilled cheese. He's very particular about his mother's happiness. Have a good day." And he left. Nobody questioned how Dorothy made these connections. Nobody asked how she made these things happen. They just figured her son Vincent must have a very, very impressive network from all his business success. They were right. In the corner booth, across from Dorothy's usual spot, a well-dressed man sat. He was reading a financial newspaper. His coffee was growing cold. He was quietly observing every single person who entered and every person who left. This was Marcus. He was Vincent Washington's most trusted lieutenant. He was not here by accident. Some professional habits never fade, even if you are officially retired from dangerous work. His job was simple: watch over Mrs. Washington. Make sure her Tuesday lunch was peaceful. Today it would not be. The collision began with something as simple as a bumped elbow. Dorothy had just settled into her favorite booth. Helen was right across from her. "Oh, Dorothy, you won't believe it," Helen was saying. "My grandson Jamal, he got into college. A full scholarship." "Oh, Helen, that is the most wonderful news," Dorothy said, her eyes lighting up. At that exact moment, Richard Sterling stormed through the front door of Rosie's diner. He did not walk in. He stormed in. He looked like a man at war with the entire universe. His Armani suit was wrinkled. He was fuming. His morning had been terrible. First, a parking ticket. Some overzealous meter maid gave him a ticket while he was just 2 minutes late. Then construction delays on the highway. It made him 20 minutes late for a meeting. Then the barista at the fancy coffee shop. That idiot kid had clearly never learned proper customer service. He had messed up his very simple coffee order. And now his preferred restaurant, the Savoy, was booked solid. He couldn't get a table. So he had to come here. He had to endure this slum. He had to eat with the common people. Sterling surveyed the diner with disgust. He saw the cracked vinyl on the booths. He saw the laminated menus sticky from 1,000 hands. He smelled the air. It smelled like grease. Like honest work. He hated it. Maria Santos, the owner, approached him. She had her professional smile on, but she could sense trouble. This man was a dark cloud. "Good afternoon, sir. Table for one." Obviously, Sterling snapped. He didn't even bother to look at her. He was texting on his phone. "Somewhere clean. If such a thing even exists in this place. And I need it fast. I have important meetings this afternoon. I don't have time for this." Maria bit back her angry response. The customer was not always right. But she had a business to run. "Right this way, sir," she said, her voice tight. She led him to a small table. It was right near Dorothy's booth. Sterling threw himself into the seat. He didn't sit. He threw himself. He immediately pulled out his phone again. He started typing aggressive, angry text messages. He was probably complaining to his other rich friends about having to be in this dump. In the booth, Dorothy and Helen were not bothered. Their conversation flowed like a gentle stream. "A full scholarship, Helen. That's just... I am so proud of him," Dorothy said. "He worked so hard," Helen said, beaming. Dorothy reached for the sugar dispenser. She wanted to add a little sugar to her tea. Her elbow, moving with the careful, slow precision of an elderly woman, moved just a few inches. It barely grazed Sterling's big, expensive briefcase. He had left it sitting on the edge of the next table. The contact was feather-light. It was barely noticeable. But it was just enough. It was enough to knock over Richard Sterling's oversized coffee cup. The one he had brought in with him. Brown, hot liquid cascaded all across his briefcase. It seeped into the expensive Italian leather. It pooled around a stack of legal documents he had pulled out. Sterling watched in pure horror. The coffee soaked through contracts. It soaked through depositions. It soaked through case files that represented weeks of billable hours. "What the hell?" Sterling exploded. He leaped to his feet. The entire diner fell silent. Every single eye turned toward the drama. Dorothy was horrified. She immediately began reaching for napkins from the dispenser. "Oh my goodness," she said. "Oh dear. I'm so terribly sorry. I didn't see it. Let me help you clean that up." But Richard Sterling was beyond reason. He was beyond apologizing. All the morning's frustrations. The parking ticket. The late meeting. His sense of superiority. His fundamental, deep-down belief that people like Dorothy, old, black people, existed only to inconvenience people like him. Everything converged. It all came together into one moment of pure, undiluted rage. "You clumsy old bat," he shouted. His voice was loud and ugly. Look what you've done." Dorothy's hand froze. She was still clutching the napkins. Her friend Helen gasped. Maria, the owner, started moving toward the table. But Sterling's voice cut through the air like a blade. Stopped everyone. "These documents," he shrieked, pointing a shaking finger at the wet papers. "These documents are worth more than you will see in your entire, pathetic life. Do you have any idea? Any idea at all? What you just cost me?" Dorothy slowly straightened up. She was still seated, but she sat up straight. Her dignity was like a shield. "Sir," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "It was clearly an accident. I am happy to pay for any cleaning costs. Or for the papers. Cleaning costs." Sterling's voice went even higher. It was a near shriek. He laughed, but it was a mean, ugly laugh. "Cleaning costs? These are irreplaceable legal documents. These are contracts with Fortune 500 companies. These are cases that determine whether real Americans keep their jobs or lose them to your kind." The words hung in the air. Your kind. The racial undercurrent was not an undercurrent. It was obvious. It was unmistakable. Several customers who had been frozen now slowly began to pull out their phones. They sensed this was more than just a spilled coffee. Dorothy's voice remained steady. She would not let him break her. "Sir, I understand you are upset. But there is no need for that kind of language. Don't you dare tell me what kind of language to use." Sterling stepped closer. He was towering over Dorothy's seated frame. He was a big man and she was a small, old woman. "You people need to learn your place. This is exactly what happens when you let just anyone into decent establishments." Helen Morrison, who was 78 years old and a retired school principal, found her voice. She was not afraid of bullies. "Young man," she said, her voice sharp, "you are being completely unreasonable. It was an accident. Accidents happen." Sterling whirled on her. His face was red with rage. "And you can shut your mouth too. I don't need a lecture from some welfare queen about reasonable behavior." That was it. That's when the phones came up. Not just one or two. A dozen. Everyone was recording now. The racial slurs were impossible to miss. They were impossible to excuse. In the corner, Marcus Vincent's man was not reading his paper anymore. His phone was out. It was already recording. Maria Santos, the owner, had heard enough. This was her diner. These were her customers. "Sir," she said, stepping forward, "I'm going to have to ask you to lower your voice, or you will have to leave my establishment." Sterling turned his fury on Maria. "Your establishment?" he sneered, looking around. "You mean this grease pit? You should be thanking me for even setting foot in here. People like me are the only reason that places like this dump, stay in business." Slowly, deliberately, Dorothy Washington stood up. Her movements were controlled. She was only 5 feet 4 inches tall. She still had to look up at Richard Sterling's 6-foot frame. But something in her posture, something in her quiet dignity, it commanded attention. Suddenly he looked small. His expensive clothes looked like a cheap costume. "Sir," Dorothy said. Her voice was not loud, but it cut through the silence. "I have apologized to you, sincerely, for an honest mistake. I have offered to pay for any damages. But I will not sit here and allow you to speak to me, or to my friend, or to this lovely business owner, with such hatred, with such disrespect." Sterling's face twisted. It was a mask of pure rage. The idea, the nerve, that this nobody, this insignificant old black woman, would dare to stand up to him. That she would dare to lecture him about respect. It was more than his mind could handle. "You'll sit down and you'll shut up," he hissed, his voice low and dangerous. "Or I will make sure you regret ever leaving whatever government housing project spawned you." Dorothy's voice remained as steady as granite, as strong as a mountain. "I have every right to be in this restaurant," she said. "I have been a customer here for longer than you have probably known this neighborhood existed. I am a taxpayer. I am a community member. And I am a human being. And I deserve basic courtesy." "Human being?" Sterling's laugh was ugly. It was sharp-edged. "You're nothing. You are nothing but a drain on society. You and your whole, worthless, kind." The words hung in the air. They were like poison. The phone cameras captured every single syllable. Dorothy straightened to her full height. She radiated a dignity that was ancient. It was powerful. "Young man," she said. Her voice was not angry. It was sad. "You clearly do not know who you are speaking to." "I know exactly who you are," Sterling snarled. He was leaning in, his face inches from hers. "You're a nobody from nowhere. You have nothing. And you matter to absolutely no one." The silence that followed was deafening. And then, Richard Sterling's hand moved. He grabbed Dorothy's wrist. His big, strong fingers dug into her thin, old skin. He squeezed. He squeezed with enough force to leave dark, ugly marks. "You are going to sit down," he whispered. "You are going to shut up. And you are going to figure out how you are going to pay for what you destroyed." Dorothy looked down at his hand. His big, white hand gripping her small, dark wrist. Then she looked back up at his face. "Sir," she said. Her voice did not even tremble. "You need to let go of me. Now." "I'll let go," he sneered, "when you learn to show proper respect to your betters." Helen Morrison was on her feet now, screaming. "Let go of her. Let go of her this instant." Maria Santos was moving closer. Her own cell phone was in her hand. "Sir, if you do not release her immediately, I am calling the police." But Richard Sterling was beyond all reason. He was beyond any thought of consequences. The stress, the bad morning, the caffeine, and the fundamental boiling rage that came from a lifetime of believing the world owed him. It all crystallized. It crystallized in this one moment. The moment when Dorothy tried to pull her wrist free. The moment when she looked at him with those calm, unafraid eyes. Eyes that said, "I have faced down bigger, meaner monsters than you, little boy." Something inside him snapped. It broke completely. His free hand came up. It came up fast. The sound echoed through the diner like a gunshot. Dorothy's head snapped to the side. The coffee-stained napkins she was holding scattered to the floor. Her wedding ring, the ring her beloved Samuel had given her, the ring she had worn for 52 years, it flew from her finger. It flew through the air. It landed on the linoleum floor. It rolled, and rolled, and rolled, and it came to a stop. It stopped right against a pair of expensive, polished, Italian leather shoes. The shoes in the corner booth. The shoes belonging to Marcus. For one single heartbeat, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then, chaos erupted. Oh my God. He hit her. Did you get that? I got it. I got it all. Customers leaped to their feet. Phones were held high. Everyone was recording everything. Maria Santos was already on the phone. Her fingers were shaking as she dialed 911. Helen Morrison rushed to Dorothy's side. Tears were streaming down Helen's face. Dorothy, are you okay? But Dorothy Washington didn't cry. She slowly, calmly touched her cheek. She touched the spot where his palm had connected. She could feel the heat. She could feel the red mark blooming across her dark skin. She looked at Richard Sterling. And she looked at him with something that wasn't fear. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even surprise. It was pity. You have no idea, she said quietly. You have no idea what you just did. Sterling's breathing was heavy. He was panting like an animal. But his satisfaction was clear. He straightened his tie. He had done it. Another nobody put back in their place. Another lesson taught about the natural order of things. He had no idea. He had no idea that in the corner booth, Marcus Vincent Washington's most trusted man was already on the phone. He wasn't calling 911. He was speed dialing a number that would change everything. Marcus bent down. He picked up Dorothy's wedding ring. He pocketed it carefully. Maybe it was for evidence. Or maybe it was just something to return to the woman his boss loved more than life itself. By the time the first police sirens became audible in the distance, Richard Sterling had exactly 18 hours left. 18 hours left of believing he was untouchable. Sergeant Mike Rodriguez arrived at Rosie's diner. He was expecting another routine disturbance call. A fight. A drunk customer. Instead, he found a dozen phones all still recording. He found an atmosphere so thick with tension you could cut it with a knife. And he saw an elderly woman holding her cheek, being comforted by her friend. Before Rodriguez could even speak, Richard Sterling seized control. "Officer. Thank God you're here," Sterling said, his voice smooth and professional. "I was attacked by these people while I was just trying to enjoy a peaceful lunch." He flashed his expensive leather wallet, showing his law credentials. "Richard Sterling," he said as if the name should mean something. "Senior partner at Crawford, Sterling and Associates. That woman," he pointed at Dorothy, "deliberately destroyed my property. And then she and her friends became violent when I simply requested compensation." Sergeant Rodriguez was a 20-year veteran. He had seen a lot, and his gut was screaming. He surveyed the scene. Every single witness, the owner, the other customers, they all wore the same exact expression. Pure disgust. And it was all aimed squarely at Richard Sterling. That was not typical. It's not the look people give the victim. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step back," Rodriguez said, his voice firm. "Let me assess the situation." Sterling started name-dropping. It was shameless. "You should know Detective Captain Morrison is a personal friend of mine," Sterling said, trying to intimidate the sergeant. "And Commissioner Walsh? He attends my country club. We play golf. So I trust this will be handled appropriately." Rodriguez just stared at him. "Sir, step back." He walked over to Dorothy. "Ma'am, are you all right? Can you tell me what happened?" Dorothy gave her statement. She spoke with quiet dignity. Her voice never wavered. She told him exactly what happened. The spilled coffee. The names he called her. The names he called her friend. The way he grabbed her wrist. And the slap. Her cheek was already swelling. It was turning a dark, painful-looking purple. "Ma'am, do you need an ambulance?" "No, thank you, officer. I will be fine." "I need to ask for your emergency contacts," Rodriguez said. Dorothy reached into her purse. She handed him an elegant, simple business card. The cardstock was thick, felt heavy, expensive. "My son Vincent should be notified," she said. Rodriguez looked at the card. Just said, "Vincent Washington, private consultant," and a phone number. Rodriguez frowned. "What kind of consulting does he do, ma'am?" Dorothy's smile was small and it was mysterious. "Business consulting," she said. "He helps people solve problems." Within an hour, the grainy cell phone footage hit social media. It was posted by 10 different people at once. The video of Richard Sterling in his expensive suit, screaming worthless ghetto trash and welfare queen. The video of him slapping a 72-year-old woman, it spread like wildfire. The hashtag Justice for Dorothy began trending. It didn't take long. Internet sleuths quickly identified the man in the video. Richard Sterling. They found his law firm's website. They found his recent court victories. The ones where he defended giant corporations against discrimination lawsuits. The irony, the hypocrisy, it was not lost on anyone. The phones at Sterling's law office erupted into a full-blown crisis. Partners convened emergency meetings. Clients, the big important ones, started calling with concerns. But Sterling himself? He remained confident. He was arrogant. "This will all blow over," he told his partners. "It's a nothing burger. Some people got slapped for being disrespectful. It's a simple assault charge. I'll pay a fine. People understand that actions have consequences." He truly believed he was the victim. Meanwhile, in her quiet apartment, Dorothy made a phone call. Helen was with her, putting a bag of frozen peas on her cheek. Vincent picked up on the first ring. "Hey Ma, you're home early. How was lunch?" "Vincent, honey," Dorothy said, her voice quiet. I had a little trouble at lunch today." The voice on the other end of the phone changed. Instantly. The warm, loving son was gone. The busy businessman was gone. He was replaced by something else. Something much more focused. Something cold. "What kind of trouble, Ma?" he asked. His voice was flat. "Are you hurt?" "It was just a misunderstanding," Dorothy said, trying to downplay it. "With another customer. He got very upset about some spilled coffee and, well, he struck me." For 3 full seconds there was only silence. A deadly, heavy, terrifying silence. Then Vincent spoke. His voice was so quiet, Dorothy could barely hear him. "He hit you? It's just a bruised cheek, baby. I'm fine. The police are here. They were very nice. There were witnesses. I thought you should know." Another silence. This one was longer. "What's his name, Ma?" "Who?" "The man. What is his name?" "Oh, Sterling. Richard Sterling. I think he's some kind of lawyer." "Richard Sterling." Vincent repeated the name. He was memorizing it. He was engraving it on his mind. "Ma," he said, his voice suddenly sharp, full of authority. "Listen to me. Listen very carefully. Do not speak to any reporters. Do not post anything online. Do not sign anything from the police or anyone else until I have my people look at it. I am handling this now." "Oh, Vincent, honey, no. You don't need to get involved. It was just a mess." "Ma." That one word. It carried absolute finality. Someone put their hands. This is business now. Richard Sterling was cited for assault. And then he was released. It was standard procedure. A misdemeanor. A first-time offender. He would get a court date. He'd pay a fine. That was it. He was so confident he even posted on social media that evening. He went on Twitter. He framed himself as the victim. He said he was the victim of a shakedown attempt by an opportunist. He complained about politically correct overreach and how men can't defend themselves anymore. His followers, the people who thought just like him, they rallied to his defense. "You tell him, Richard." Praising Sterling for standing up to the race hustlers. These people are always looking for a handout. The echo chamber, it reinforced his confidence. He was sure he was right. A few weeks of some minor, annoying controversy. Maybe his firm would make him go to some stupid sensitivity training. And then everything would return to normal. Richard Sterling had spent his entire career understanding power. He knew which people mattered. And he knew which kinds of people, could be safely ignored, crushed, forgotten. He had calculated that Dorothy Washington fell into that second category. It was the single most expensive miscalculation of his entire life. Because while Richard Sterling slept peacefully in his penthouse apartment, certain phone calls were being made across the city. Quiet conversations. Conversations between people who owed favors. People who remembered old debts. People who understood with absolute certainty that Vincent Washington's family, and especially his mother, was not to be touched. The system that Richard Sterling thought he owned, was about to work in a very, very different way than he ever expected. Vincent Washington was not at his office. He was sitting in the back room of Torino's. It was the most exclusive, most expensive Italian restaurant in the city. You couldn't get a reservation here. You had to be invited. This weekly gathering, it looked like any other high-powered business dinner. You saw expensive suits. You saw quiet, serious conversations. You saw men and women drinking expensive wine. It looked like the kind of meeting where fortunes were made and fortunes were destroyed, all with a simple handshake. Except, these were not Fortune 500 executives. This was the other side of the city's power. Vincent Washington commanded the head of the table. He sat there with a quiet, calm authority. He didn't have to raise his voice. When he spoke, people listened. To his right sat Tommy, the fish, Marone, a tough old man who controlled the docks. Every single thing that came in or out of the port, it went through Tommy. To his left sat Maria Duca, a sharp, smart woman who handled all of the family's legitimate businesses. The construction companies, the sanitation contracts, the real estate. Around the table sat other lieutenants, advisors, enforcers. All of them were waiting for Vincent's word. They were waiting for his decisions on territory disputes, on profit sharing, on the 100 daily decisions that kept the Washington family running smoothly. Vincent Washington wasn't just a successful consultant. He was the boss. He was the boss. The man who controlled half of the city's entire underground economy. The man who maintained ironclad discipline over an organization that stretched from the waterfront to the suburbs. His father had built it. Vincent had perfected it. His phone buzzed. They were in the middle of a tense discussion about a new construction contract. Vincent glanced at the screen. It said one word, Ma. He immediately stood up. "Excuse me," he said quietly. And the entire room of hardened, dangerous men and women, fell completely silent. When Vincent Washington took a call from his mother, everything else stopped. He stepped into the adjoining private office. It was soundproof. He closed the heavy wooden door behind him. He hit the button. "Ma? What's wrong? Are you home early?" Dorothy's voice carried through the speaker. It was calm. It was measured. But Vincent knew his mother. He could hear the tiny tremble underneath. "I had a little trouble at lunch today, Vincent," she said. "A man, he became very upset about some spilled coffee. And he struck me." The temperature in the soundproof office seemed to drop 20 degrees. Vincent's face did not change. But his eyes went cold. They went dead. "He hit you?" Even through the thick, soundproof walls, the men in the next room heard the change. They heard the danger in that one quiet question. They all looked at each other. This was bad. "His name is Richard Sterling," Dorothy said. "Some kind of lawyer." Vincent closed his eyes. He was processing. He was thinking. He was doing it with the methodical, cold precision that had made him the most feared and respected man in 3 states. Someone had put their hands on Dorothy Washington. Someone was about to learn why that was the single most dangerous and stupid mistake of their life. "Ma," he said, his voice calm again. "Are you hurt? Do you need medical attention? Do I need to send Dr. Harris?" No, baby. Just a bruised cheek. It's just sore. Helen is with me." And the police were very professional. Really? Vincent's mind was already working. It was moving like a supercomputer. He was calculating responses. He was measuring consequences. The old Vincent, The young, angry Vincent who had grown up on these streets. The Vincent who had earned this position through violence and intimidation. That Vincent, he wanted one thing. He wanted immediate, brutal, and bloody retribution. He wanted to find this Richard Sterling but Dorothy had raised him better than that. His mother had spent 52 years teaching him, beating it into him, that there was a better way. "Ma," he said, his voice firm, "listen to me. Don't speak to any reporters. Don't sign anything. And don't you worry about this Sterling character. I will handle everything. Vincent, honey, please. You don't need to get involved in this mess. I don't want any trouble." "Ma." That one word again. That absolute finality. Someone put their hands on you. This stopped being a mess the moment he made that choice. "I love you. I will call you in the morning." He ended the call. He stood motionless for 30 long seconds. He just stared at his reflection in the dark office window. The city sprawled out below him. His city. A city where his word was law. A city where his protection meant everything. He opened the heavy door. He returned to the dining room. 8 pairs of eyes watched him. They were watching him with the focused attention of soldiers awaiting orders from their general. "Change of plans," Vincent announced. His voice was quiet, but it filled the room. "Tommy, I need everything you can find on a lawyer named Richard Sterling. Full background. Finances. Family. Enemies. Weaknesses. I want to know what he eats for breakfast. I want to know what he dreams about at night. I want it in 1 hour. Not 2. Tommy the fish nodded. He didn't ask questions. He was already pulling out his phone. "On it, boss." "What kind of lawyer?" Vincent's eyes scanned the table. "The kind," he said, his voice perfectly even, "who thinks he can slap my mother and walk away." The reaction was immediate. It was electric. Chairs scraped back. Hands instinctively moved toward concealed weapons. Maria Duca's face went pale with anger. "Boss," she said, her voice shaking with rage. "Just say the word. Just say the word. He won't see the sunrise." Another man, Leo, stood up. "I've got a crew. We can pick him up right now. We can take him for a ride. No one will ever find him." Vincent held up one hand, and the entire room froze. This was why he commanded absolute loyalty. It was not just his capacity for violence. It was his ability to control it. "No," he said. "Sit down. All of you." They sat. "We do this right," Vincent said. "We do this smart. My mother, she wants justice. She does not want revenge. There is a difference." He looked at all of them. "We are not them. We are not animals. We will use the system. But we will make damn sure that the system works properly." Across town, Richard Sterling was not worried. He was enjoying a celebratory dinner at his expensive country club. He was sitting with his other rich, white friends. He was regaling them with his version of the day's events. He was bragging. "You should have seen it," he laughed, taking a sip of his $500 bottle of wine. "This old woman, totally unhinged, threw her coffee all over my files. Then she starts demanding money." In his story, he had turned Dorothy into a grasping opportunist. He had turned himself into the victim of a shakedown attempt. His audience, they ate it up. Good for you, Richard. It's about time someone stood up to them. These were his people. Wealthy, powerful, and completely convinced that all the world's problems, they all stemmed from other people. People who just couldn't know their place. Richard Sterling had no idea. He had no idea that his name, his entire life, was currently being torn apart, researched, and analyzed by some of the most thorough and most dangerous investigators that money could buy. People who specialized in finding pressure points. People who understood that everyone has secrets worth protecting. Within the hour, Vincent had the complete dossier. It was sitting in front of him on the restaurant table. And it was beautiful. Richard Sterling was not as successful as he looked. He had massive financial troubles. Hidden from his partners, of course. He had a pattern of discrimination lawsuits. All of them settled quietly out of court. He had gambling debts. Big ones. He owed money to people who were not very patient about repayment. And most importantly, Richard Sterling owed over $100,000 to a man named Michael Big Mike Torino, who just happened to be Vincent's cousin. The irony was almost poetic. Sterling was in their debt. Vincent looked up from the file. He smiled. It was not a nice smile. "All right," he said. "Now, we begin." He made his first call. He did not call his cousin. He did not call a wise guy. He called the district attorney, Margaret Maggie Carter. They had known each other since childhood. She had grown up just 3 blocks from the Washington house. She had attended Dorothy's Sunday school classes for 5 straight years. Her phone rang. She was at home working late. D.A. Carter. "Maggie. It's Vincent. Vincent Washington." Her voice was immediately cautious. "Vincent, you can't call me on my personal line. I can't discuss ongoing cases with you." "I know," he said. "I'm not calling about a case. I'm calling about my mother." Pause. A long one. Maggie Carter knew exactly who Dorothy Washington was. She knew what that woman meant to the neighborhood, and what she meant to Vincent. "Is she all right? Is Dorothy okay?" "Someone assaulted her today," Vincent said. His voice was flat. "A man named Richard Sterling. He hit her. In a diner. In front of witnesses." Another pause. "Vincent, you know I can't promise any special treatment." "I'm not asking for special treatment, Maggie," he said. His voice was soft. "I'm asking for justice. The real kind. The kind my mother taught both of us to believe in. The kind she deserves." Maggie Carter was quiet for a long, long moment. She owed her entire career to Dorothy Washington. When her father lost his job, when she thought she would have to drop out of high school, Dorothy had tutored her. For free. For 2 years. Dorothy had written the recommendation letter. The letter that got Maggie her full scholarship to law school. Dorothy Washington had believed in her when no one else, not even Maggie herself, did. "Send me the case file number," Maggie said, her voice hard. I'll review it. Personally." "Thank you, Maggie." He hung up. His second call was to the police commissioner, Frank Walsh. Another old neighborhood connection. Frank had grown up there. He remembered when Dorothy Washington had organized the community watch. The watch that kept their streets safe. The watch that kept kids like him, and kids like Vincent, from falling into the wrong life. His third call was to Judge Patricia Martinez. She was one of the most powerful judges in the state, and she had received her very first legal job, her first internship, through a referral that Dorothy Washington had arranged all those years ago. One by one, Vincent contacted people. Not with threats. Not with bribes. He contacted people who owed Dorothy Washington debts of gratitude. This wasn't corruption. This was deeper. This was something earned. It was earned through 50 years of quiet kindness. 50 years of believing in people before they believed in themselves. By midnight, Richard Sterling's simple assault case had been flagged. It was flagged for priority review. Not because of any illegal influence, but because Dorothy Washington had spent 50 years building a community of people who now remembered her faith in them. Vincent Washington, he commanded fear throughout the criminal underworld. But Dorothy Washington, she commanded something infinitely more powerful. She commanded respect throughout the legitimate world. Richard Sterling went to sleep that night confident. He was sure that his country club connections would protect him. He had no idea. He had no idea that Dorothy's connections, they ran deeper. They reached higher. And they mattered so much more than his golf partnerships. The most dangerous man in the city was about to teach Richard Sterling the real difference. The difference between power and influence. The difference between fear and respect. And the difference between what money can buy and what character earns. District Attorney Margaret Maggie Carter arrived at her office at 6 a.m. This was 2 hours before her usual schedule. The Sterling case file was already on her desk. It was marked with a big red priority review flag. She had known this day would come. Eventually. The day when her professional job, her duty as the DA, would cross paths with her personal loyalty. Her loyalty to the woman who had, quite literally, saved her life. Maggie opened the file. She read it with the same methodical precision that had made her the youngest and toughest DA in the city's history. She read the police report. She read the witness statements. And then, she watched the videos. She watched the body cam footage. She watched the dozen cell phone videos from every single angle. The evidence was overwhelming. It was disgusting. But that wasn't what concerned her. What concerned her was the phone call from Vincent. She remembered Dorothy's Sunday school classes. She remembered Dorothy's smile. She remembered when her own father lost his job at the factory. They had nothing. They were going to lose their apartment. Dorothy had shown up. She had a bag of groceries in one hand, and in the other, she had a stack of law school application forms. "You're too smart to stop now, Margaret," Dorothy had told her. This is just a bump in the road." Dorothy had written the recommendation letter that got Maggie a full scholarship. Dorothy had believed in her. And now, Vincent was calling in that debt. He wasn't using threats. He wasn't using intimidation. He was using something much, much more powerful. He was using the simple request that justice, real justice, be served properly. Maggie picked up her office phone. She dialed her top prosecutor, Assistant DA James Rodriguez. "James, I need you in my office. Immediately. Bring the Sterling assault case." "Yes, the one from last night." Rodriguez arrived within 20 minutes. He had a coffee in his hand. He looked confused. "Ma'am? With all due respect, this seems like a straightforward open and shut assault case. A misdemeanor. Why the priority review? Why are you looking at it?" Maggie Carter stood up. She started spreading documents across her giant conference table. "Because James," she said, her voice cold, "Richard Sterling has a pattern." She pointed to the files. "I've been reviewing his history. All morning. 3 previous incidents. All of them, settled out of court. All of them, involving minority plaintiffs." She handed Rodriguez a thick folder. "These," she said, "are the employment discrimination lawsuits. The ones where Sterling represented the corporate defendants. Hostile workplace complaints, that mysteriously disappeared right before trial. Sexual harassment cases, that never made it to a jury." Rodriguez's eyes went wide. He whistled low. "My God. He's been using his position to silence victims. For years. And now he's the one doing the assaulting." "Exactly," Maggie said. "This is not a simple assault, James. This is a hate crime. This is a civil rights violation. And this is the culmination of a 20-year career of racial and social abuse." She looked him right in the eyes. "I want you to build this case," she said. "I want you to build it like it's the most important trial of your entire career. Because if we don't stop this man, right now, Dorothy Washington won't be his last victim." She didn't mention her personal connection to Dorothy. She didn't have to. The evidence spoke for itself. Across town at police headquarters, Commissioner Frank Walsh was having a very similar conversation. He was talking to his best detective, Captain Sarah Morrison. "Captain," Walsh said, his voice grim, "I want you to personally oversee the Sterling investigation. Full resources. Complete transparency. I want everything, by the book." Captain Morrison frowned. "Sir, this is a misdemeanor assault. We don't usually assign detective captains to a slap. Richard Sterling assaulted a 72-year-old woman in front of 20 witnesses." Walsh interrupted. His voice was loud. "This case," he said, lowering his voice, "is going to attract media attention. It's going to attract community scrutiny. And it's probably going to attract federal oversight, if we handle it wrong." He leaned forward. "I want it handled right, Captain. Do you understand me?" "Yes, sir." Walsh had his own reasons for being so invested. 20 years ago, when he was just a rookie beat cop, he had come back from his military service. He had terrible PTSD. He was drinking. He was messing up at work. He was about to be fired. Dorothy Washington, who he didn't even know, had organized a community support group for veterans. She had connected him with counseling. She had sat with him. She had talked to him. And when Internal Affairs was about to fire him, Dorothy Washington had shown up. She had vouched for his character. She said he was a good man who was just hurt. Dorothy Washington had given him a second chance. A chance no one else would. She had saved his career. She had saved his life. Now, it was his turn to repay that debt. Captain Morrison assembled a team of her senior detectives. They began re-examining every single piece of evidence. The body cam footage? It clearly revealed Sterling's lies to the first responding officers. The witness statements? They painted a clear, perfect picture of escalating racial harassment. The cell phone videos? They captured every slur, every threat, every moment of humiliation. But the most damaging evidence, the thing that would destroy Richard Sterling, it came from Sterling himself. His own social media activity, his posts from that very evening, the ones where he was gloating, the ones where he was bragging about putting entitled minorities in their place, the ones where he bragged about his connections protecting him. Richard Sterling had, in his arrogance, documented his own hate crime. He had gift-wrapped the case for the DA. Meanwhile, at the law firm of Crawford, Sterling and Associates, the senior partners were discovering the full, terrible scope of their exposure. Managing partner Harrison Crawford sat at the head of a giant, polished table. He looked pale. He looked sick. He was in an emergency session with the firm's other founding partners. They were reviewing Sterling's case history and the social media firestorm with growing horror. "Gentlemen," Crawford announced. His voice was shaking. "We have a problem. A big one." Partner Thomas Wakefield was on his tablet. "Harrison, the video, it has over 2 million views. In just a few hours. The hashtag Justice for Dorothy. It's trending nationally. Nationally. Our biggest client, Megacorp, they just canceled their retainer. They said they can't be associated with, and I quote, this racist behavior. We have to cut him loose," declared partner Elizabeth Hayes. "We have to. Immediately. We issue a statement. We condemn his actions. We announce his suspension, pending a full investigation." But they were already too late. Vincent Washington's people, his consultants, had been busy. All through the night. They had been making phone calls. They had been sharing information with the right people. They had been making sure that Richard Sterling's entire history became public knowledge. By morning, it wasn't just on social media. Investigative journalists, the real ones, had Sterling's complete disciplinary record from the State Bar Association. Employment lawyers, the ones Sterling had bullied for years, were suddenly coming forward. They were telling stories of his harassment tactics. Former clients, the ones he had silenced, were now describing his discriminatory behavior. In depositions, in court filings, Sterling's carefully built reputation, his entire career, was collapsing. In real time. At 10 a.m. Richard Sterling arrived at his office. He was still arrogant. He was still whistling. He stepped off the private elevator and found 2 large security guards. They were waiting for him. They were holding empty cardboard boxes. What the hell is this?" Sterling demanded. Harrison Crawford, his friend, stepped out from behind the guards. His expression was grim. "Richard," Crawford said. His voice was flat. "The partners have voted. Unanimously. We are terminating your employment. Effective, immediately. Your actions have brought disgrace and massive liability to this firm. We can't afford you." Sterling's face went white. "Fire me?" he stammered. "Fire me? Harrison, I'm a founding partner. You can't fire me." "Read your partnership agreement, Richard," Crawford said, holding up a letter. "The morality clause. It's quite specific. Any behavior that damages the firm's reputation is grounds for immediate termination. And you didn't just damage it. You blew it up." Sterling's legs felt weak. Without the firm, without their protection, without their resources, their money, their connections, he was not Richard Sterling, the powerful lawyer. He was just another defendant. A defendant facing very, very serious criminal charges. "Harrison, please," he begged. His voice was small now. "We've been friends for 20 years. My clients generate millions in revenue for this firm." "Your former clients, Richard," Crawford said. He was cold. "They have all, every single one, requested new representation. This morning." Crawford handed him the letter. "You have 1 hour to clear out your office. Security will escort you from the building. Goodbye, Richard." As Sterling, shaking, started to pack his personal items, his assistant, Jennifer, was receiving dozens of calls. Reporters, civil rights organizations, and the FBI. Sterling's phone was buzzing. Over and over. Notifications. Clients, terminating their contracts. Colleagues, distancing themselves. Country club members, expressing concern about his membership. The social isolation was swift. Was total. But Vincent Washington, he wasn't finished. Not even close. That afternoon, as Sterling was sitting in his penthouse, stunned, his doorbell rang. He opened it. Two people stood there. A man and a woman. They were in dark suits. They held up badges. "Mr. Richard Sterling?" the woman asked. "Agent Patricia Valdez, FBI. We'd like to ask you a few questions." The assault?" Sterling stammered. "The FBI? For a misdemeanor?" Agent Valdez's smile was thin. It was cold. "Oh no, Mr. Sterling. We're not here about the assault. We're here to discuss your representation of the Megalith Corporation back in 2021. The discrimination lawsuit? We'd like to talk to you, specifically, about your strategies for silencing minority plaintiffs." Sterling's blood ran cold. The assault, the slap, it wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. It was the key. It was the thing that had unlocked the door to all of his other crimes. The investigation that Dorothy's assault had triggered was now expanding. It was expanding into his entire career. That night, Judge Patricia Martinez, the judge who owed her first job to Dorothy, reviewed the case for the preliminary hearing. She noted Sterling's long history of using legal tricks, technicalities, to escape accountability. This time, she thought, this time, there will be no tricks. She would ensure every procedural requirement was met. She would ensure every piece of evidence was properly admitted. She would ensure every I was dotted and every T was crossed. Sterling had built his career on exploiting the system's weaknesses. Now, that very same system, guided by the very people who owed Dorothy Washington their success, was closing every single loophole he might have tried to use. By evening, Richard Sterling sat alone. He sat in his giant, cold, marble penthouse. He was all alone. He was watching the news coverage of his own downfall. Richard Sterling, once one of the city's top corporate lawyers, was fired today. The FBI is now investigating Sterling's firm for. Sources say multiple clients have dropped the firm, citing the video, which has now been viewed over 10 million times. He just stared. He could not understand. How could this happen? How could one stupid, insignificant, elderly black woman, how could she have triggered this? How could she have triggered this coordinated, total response? This response that had destroyed everything he had spent decades building. How did it happen so fast? So thoroughly? He still didn't get it. He still thought he had just slapped a nobody. Richard Sterling had no idea. He had no idea that Dorothy Washington had spent 50 years investing in people, investing in their futures, believing in their potential, helping them achieve success, through education, through opportunity, through simple human decency. He had no idea. Vincent Washington commanded fear through violence and intimidation. But Dorothy Washington, she commanded something infinitely more powerful. She commanded love. She commanded loyalty. She commanded gratitude. Gratitude from hundreds of people. People whose lives she had touched. Sterling thought he had slapped some random old woman. He had actually struck the mother figure. The mother figure of half of the city's entire power structure. Judges, prosecutors, police officials, community leaders, people who all remembered Dorothy's faith in them when no one else cared. The investigation was proceeding with unprecedented speed. It was proceeding with unprecedented thoroughness, not because of corruption, not because of any outside pressure, but because people, good people, who owed Dorothy Washington everything, were finally able to repay their debts. They were repaying her by simply ensuring that justice was served properly. Richard Sterling's world was crumbling. It was crumbling in exactly the way Vincent Washington had planned. Through the system, with dignity, using the very principles of justice that Dorothy had spent her life teaching. The most dangerous man in the city was keeping his promise to his mother. Sterling would face the consequences. He would face them through legal channels. He would be surrounded by people who remembered Dorothy's kindness, and by people who remembered Vincent's patience. But patience always has its limits. And Richard Sterling, he was about to learn that some mistakes can never be undone, no matter how many connections you think you have. He was about to learn that he had not just slapped a nobody, he had slapped the mother of the most powerful man in the city. A man who had learned, from her, that true strength, it doesn't come from violence. It comes from knowing when, and how, to use every single tool at your disposal. The countdown, to Richard Sterling's final destruction, had officially begun. The courtroom was packed. It was beyond capacity. Media crews with their big cameras lined the hallway. They were capturing every single person who entered. Civil rights leaders. They sat shoulder to shoulder with neighborhood residents from Dorothy's community. Federal observers, men and women in dark suits. They monitored from the back rows. The case of the people versus Richard Sterling had become a symbol. It was a symbol of something much larger than just one moment of violence in a diner. Richard Sterling entered through a side door. He was flanked by his new attorney, a man named Michael Carter, a public defender, a young, overwhelmed lawyer who had drawn the short straw when Sterling's original expensive legal team had abandoned him. Gone was the $10,000 Armani suit. It was replaced by an ill-fitting, cheap jacket. It was from a discount store. Gone was the arrogant, proud swagger. It was replaced by the hunched, stooped shoulders of a man who had lost everything. His money, his job, his friends, his reputation. He looked broken. He looked small. In the gallery's front row sat Dorothy Washington. She was wearing her Sunday best dress. Her back was perfectly straight. Her head was held high. She radiated the same quiet, powerful dignity that had sustained her through 72 years of life's challenges. Beside her, her friend Helen Morrison held her hand. They were in this together. And in the back corner, almost invisible, hiding in the shadows, Vincent Washington watched. He watched with the cold, quiet patience of a predator who had finally cornered his prey. Sterling's eyes, they scanned the crowd. He was looking for something. Pity? A friendly face? There were none. And then, his eyes found Vincent, across the courtroom. For the very first time, since this whole nightmare began, Richard Sterling truly understood. He understood who Dorothy Washington's son was. The expensive suit, the perfect, calm appearance, the way the courthouse security guards had nodded at him, respectfully, as he passed. This was not just some successful businessman. This was him, the man in the shadows, the man who owned this city, the man who commanded fear and respect in equal measure, the man whose protection Dorothy had enjoyed without even knowing it existed. Sterling felt sick. All rise. Judge Patricia Martinez entered, the very judge who Dorothy had helped all those years ago. The court is now in session, the judge said. Her voice was firm. The people versus Richard Sterling. Case number 2024 CR 4-7-5-1. The charges are assault in the third degree, aggravated harassment, and civil rights violations. Assistant DA James Rodriguez stood up. He was the young, smart prosecutor that Maggie Carter had assigned, and he had, as ordered, built the most important case of his career. Over the past 3 weeks, he had built an argument that went far beyond a single slap. Your Honor, Rodriguez began. His voice was strong. It filled the courtroom. The defendant, Richard Sterling, didn't just slap Dorothy Washington. He perpetrated a hate crime. He perpetrated a hate crime against a pillar of our community. He pointed at Sterling. He used racial slurs. He used physical violence. He did it to terrorize an elderly woman whose only offense was existing in a space that he believed belonged exclusively to people like him. Rodriguez began to present the evidence, methodically, one piece at a time. Each one was a hammer blow. First, the body cam footage. Officer, I was attacked. She became violent. It showed Sterling's lies to the police. Second, the cell phone videos. All 12 of them. The sound was crystal clear. The courtroom was forced to listen to Sterling's voice. Ghetto trash. Welfare queen. You're worthless kind. Nobody from nowhere. The words, they echoed in the terrible silence. Third, the witness testimony. Maria, Helen, the other customers. They all described, in painful detail, the escalating harassment. And fourth, the final nail. Sterling's own social media posts. The ones where he was bragging about the incident. This Rodriguez said to the jury, is not a man who is sorry. This is not a man who made a mistake. This is a man who was proud of what he did. He documented his own hatred. But Rodriguez wasn't done. But, Your Honor, this wasn't an isolated incident. This wasn't just one bad day. This is a pattern. He brought out the evidence of Sterling's career. The defendant has a 20-year pattern of targeting minorities, of harassing them, of discriminating against them. We have three previous incidents. We have multiple employment lawsuits. Lawsuits where he silenced victims, through intimidation, and through legal tricks. This wasn't a moment of anger, Your Honor. This was the culmination of a career built on systematic racism. Sterling's public defender, the young, overwhelmed man, he could only offer weak objections. Objection. Your Honor, my client has no prior criminal convictions. This was an isolated incident. He was having a very stressful day. Judge Martinez's expression remained neutral, but everyone could feel her controlled, cold anger. She had reviewed Sterling's complete file. She had seen the pattern that, somehow, law enforcement had missed for decades. Mr. Carter, the judge said, your client's lack of criminal convictions does not negate 20 years of civil rights violations. Your objection is noted. Please, call your first witness. Sterling's lawyer looked defeated. The defense calls Richard Sterling to the stand. Sterling took the stand. It was a decision his attorney had begged him not to make. But Sterling's arrogance, even now after losing everything, it remained. He still believed he was smarter than everyone. He still believed he could talk his way out of this. He was wrong. Your Honor, Sterling began, trying to sound like the victim. I was the victim that day. Mrs. Washington, she destroyed valuable legal documents. And then she became hostile. She became hostile when I requested reasonable compensation. I may have reacted more strongly than I should have. But I was provoked. It was time for the cross-examination. ADA James Rodriguez stood up. He walked slowly toward Sterling. He looked like a shark that was finally about to feed. Mr. Sterling, Rodriguez said, his voice polite, you testified that Mrs. Washington became hostile. Can you explain to the court what exactly you mean by hostile? Well, she became argumentative, Sterling stammered. She refused to take responsibility for her actions. I see, Rodriguez said. Did she raise her voice at you, Mr. Sterling? Well, no. But did she threaten you? In any way? Not exactly. But her attitude, it was. Mr. Sterling. Yes or no? Rodriguez's voice was sharp. Did Mrs. Dorothy Washington, a 72-year-old woman, do anything aggressive, anything violent, toward you, before you struck her? The pause lasted too long. Sterling was trapped. She was being disrespectful. Disrespectful? Rodriguez pounced. Disrespectful how? By existing in a restaurant that you considered above her station? Objection. Sterling's lawyer yelled. A little late, counselor, the judge said. The damage is done. Mr. Rodriguez, continue. Rodriguez nodded. Mr. Sterling, you used the phrase, you people. You used it multiple times during this incident. The whole courtroom, we all heard it on the video. Tell us, what did you mean by you people? I meant people who don't take responsibility for their actions. Is that what you meant? Rodriguez said, raising an eyebrow. Is that why you called Mrs. Washington a ghetto trash and a welfare queen? Because she wouldn't take responsibility? Sterling's composure, it cracked. It broke completely. I was angry, he shouted. She cost me thousands of dollars. She ruined my documents. She ruined your documents, Rodriguez repeated, nodding. The documents that were sitting unprotected on a restaurant table. The documents that, according to the diner's own security camera, Rodriguez clicked a button. A new video played on the big screen. It was from the diner's security camera. It showed Sterling storming into the diner. It showed him slamming his own briefcase down. It showed him knocking over his own coffee cup in his anger, before Dorothy had even stood up, before she had bumped anything. The timeline doesn't work in your favor, does it, Mr. Sterling? Rodriguez asked. The truth is, you were already angry. You had already spilled coffee on your own papers. You were just looking for a target, weren't you? You were looking for someone weak, someone inferior, to blame. And then, you saw her. Sterling's face was white. He was finished. No further questions, Your Honor. The prosecution calls Mrs. Dorothy Washington to the stand. The courtroom fell completely silent. You could hear a pin drop. Dorothy Washington stood up. She walked slowly with dignity to the witness stand. Rodriguez guided her through the events. He was gentle. He was respectful. He allowed her dignity, her basic goodness, to shine through. Mrs. Washington, he asked, can you describe what happened when you accidentally bumped Mr. Sterling's table? Oh yes, she said, her voice clear. I immediately apologized. I was so embarrassed. I offered to help him clean up the spill. I offered to pay for any damages, for the cleaning, for his papers, whatever he needed. And how did Mr. Sterling respond to your apology? He became very angry. He started using language that was very inappropriate. Can you be more specific, Mrs. Washington? What language did he use? Dorothy's voice remained steady, but her hands were trembling, just a little. He called me ghetto trash. He said, people like me didn't belong in decent establishments. And how did that make you feel, Mrs. Washington? For the first time, Dorothy's composure wavered. A single tear, just one, rolled down her cheek. The cheek he had struck. It reminded me, she said, her voice thick with emotion. It reminded me of a time, a long time ago. A time when such language was more common. When people felt free to express that kind of hatred openly. I'm an old woman. I thought we had moved beyond that as a society. It made me very, very sad. She wiped the tear away. Rodriguez paused. He let her words sink in. Then, his final question. Mrs. Washington, after Mr. Sterling started yelling, after he used those words, why didn't you just leave? Why didn't you just walk away from the restaurant? Dorothy Washington sat up straight. The strength, it flooded back into her. She looked, not at Rodriguez. She looked at the jury. She looked at the judge. She looked at the whole courtroom. Because, she said, her voice now ringing with power, I had every right to be there. I have been a customer at Rosie's Diner for 15 years. I have lived in that neighborhood for 45 years. I have contributed to this community. I was a teacher. I am a volunteer. I am a neighbor. I am a citizen. I was not going to be driven away by one man's hatred. The courtroom erupted. People stood up. They were clapping. They were crying. Judge Martinez banged her gavel. Order. Order in the court. But her own eyes were damp. The trial continued. It was time for the character witnesses. Sterling's lawyer stood. The defense calls Mr. Harrison Crawford. A bailiff responded. Mr. Crawford is not available to testify, Your Honor. Then, the defense calls Mr. Thomas Wakefield. Mr. Wakefield is not available. One by one, Sterling's lawyer called the names. His friends, his colleagues, his country club buddies. They all refused to testify. They had all abandoned him. Even his own family, they maintained a conspicuous and total silence. Sterling had no one. Then Rodriguez stood. The prosecution calls a list of character witnesses for the victim, Mrs. Dorothy Washington. And the line of people, it stretched out the courtroom door. First, Maria Santos from the diner. She testified, through tears, about how Dorothy had saved her family's diner. How she was the heart of the neighborhood. Then Helen Morrison. She described their 40-year friendship. She described Dorothy's gentle, kind character. Then, a doctor. A man Dorothy had tutored 30 years ago. Then, a lawyer. A woman whose family Dorothy had fed when they had no food. And then, the final, most powerful witness. The prosecution calls Dr. Patricia Williams. A woman in the robes of a federal judge walked to the stand. Rodriguez asked, "Judge Williams, how do you know Dorothy Washington?" The federal judge smiled. She looked right at Dorothy. "Mrs. Washington," the judge said, "was my high school teacher. But she was more than that. When I was 15, I got into trouble. Bad trouble. I was going to be expelled. I was on the wrong path. Dorothy Washington, she went to the school board. She fought for me. She vouched for me. She said, 'This one, she is brilliant. She just needs a chance.' She saved me. She is the only reason I'm sitting here today. Dorothy Washington is the finest, kindest, and strongest human being I have ever known." The pattern was crystal clear. The contrast was devastating. Dorothy Washington had spent her entire life lifting other people up. Richard Sterling had spent his entire career tearing other people down. The closing arguments were short. There was nothing left to say. Judge Patricia Martinez retired for deliberation. The wait lasted less than 30 minutes. On the charge of assault, how do you find? Guilty. On the charge of aggravated harassment, how do you find? Guilty. On the charge of civil rights violations, how do you find? Guilty. On all charges. Sterling's face went white. He was shaking. Judge Martinez looked down at him. Her face was like stone. "Mr. Richard Sterling," she said, her voice cold and clear, "you have been found guilty. Your actions, they do not represent just one bad day. They represent a pattern of behavior. A pattern of hatred and arrogance and abuse that has no place in our society." Sterling started to cry. Weak, sniveling tears. "This court," the judge continued, "hereby sentences you to 18 months in federal prison." Sterling gasped. Followed by 2 years of supervised probation. "You will also complete 500 hours of community service. And you will pay full restitution to Mrs. Washington for her medical expenses and for her emotional distress." But Judge Martinez, she wasn't finished. She had one final blow. "Furthermore," she said, "this court is recommending to the State Bar Association that they review your license to practice law. Your actions, your hatred, your complete lack of character, they demonstrate a fundamental nature that is incompatible with the legal profession." Sterling's legs gave out. He collapsed into his chair. It was over. His career was over. His reputation was destroyed. His freedom was forfeit. As the bailiff approached, with the handcuffs, Sterling's eyes, they found Vincent Washington. One last time. He looked desperate. Vincent did not smile. He did not nod. He did not acknowledge Sterling's existence at all. He simply stood up, and he walked to his mother. The man who had orchestrated Sterling's complete and total legal destruction, without ever lifting a finger himself, he just walked to his mom. Dorothy stood. She hugged her son. "Thank you for handling this properly, Vincent," she whispered. Vincent hugged her back. Tight. "You taught me well, Ma," he whispered. Justice matters more than revenge." Outside the courthouse, District Attorney Maggie Carter, she held a press conference. She announced new protocols. New, tougher rules for prosecuting hate crimes in the city. Police Commissioner Frank Walsh, he held a press conference. He unveiled new enhanced training programs for all officers on how to respond to bias incidents. Judge Martinez's sentencing, it had created a new precedent. A new, stronger standard that would protect future victims. The case, it had accomplished exactly what Vincent Washington had intended. Richard Sterling was destroyed through legitimate legal channels. And in the process, the system itself had been made stronger, was made better. It was made more just. It was made to protect people, like his mother. Richard Sterling was led away in handcuffs. His transformation from predator to prey was complete. The man who believed his money and his position made him untouchable. He had learned the hard way that some people command protection, not through fear, but through love. And Dorothy Washington? She went back to Rosie's diner for her Tuesday lunch, where she was treated like the queen she had always been. 6 months later, Dorothy Washington walked into Rosie's diner for her weekly lunch with Helen. The same booth was waiting. The same warm greetings from Maria and from all the regular customers. But everything had changed. The city had taken notice. The city had learned from Dorothy's grace under pressure. Mayor Patricia Johnson had presented Dorothy with the key to the city. It was at a giant ceremony. Hundreds of people attended. The citation read, "For demonstrating that dignity and courage will always triumph over prejudice." Dorothy, being Dorothy, she used her new platform wisely. She partnered with the DA's office. She established the Dorothy Washington Center for Bias Crime Victims. Federal grants, a lot of them, funded the program. Volunteer lawyers, many of them her former students, they donated thousands of hours of service. "It's not about me," Dorothy told the reporters. "It's about ensuring that no one ever has to face what I faced alone." The Sterling case, it became required reading in law schools nationwide. Police departments all across the country updated their bias crime protocols. The State Bar Association, they implemented new character requirements for all new attorneys. Richard Sterling, he was discovering justice from the receiving end. He was in prison. And every Saturday, for his court-mandated community service, he reported to the East Side Community Center. His supervisor was a 78-year-old retired teacher, Mrs. Angela Rodriguez. She took no nonsense. "You'll be serving meals," she told him on his first morning. "You'll be serving meals to seniors. Seniors who look exactly like the woman you assaulted. You will learn their names. You will learn their stories. And you will learn their dignity." The work was humbling. It was hard. He saw elderly black women serving their neighbors, organizing clothing drives, tutoring their grandchildren with the same patience that Dorothy had shown to countless students. Slowly, very slowly, Richard Sterling began to understand. He began to understand what he had tried to destroy. He had tried to destroy a pillar of the community, a person who had survived decades of prejudice with their humanity and their kindness intact. Vincent Washington, he watched all of this. He watched it with a quiet, deep satisfaction. His mother's dignity, her grace, it had accomplished what his violence never could. It had created genuine change, systemic reform, justice that prevented future victims, not justice that just punished past crimes. At Sunday dinner, at his mother's apartment, Vincent held her hand. "Ma," he said, his voice full of awe, you changed more lives through 15 minutes of grace in that diner than I have changed through 15 years of intimidation." Dorothy smiled. She patted his hand. "Violence wins battles, Vincent," she said softly. "But only love, only kindness, wins wars." Back at Rosie's diner, Maria had framed the newspaper clipping, the one of Dorothy receiving the key to the city. It hung on the wall. It hung right beside all the pictures of the neighborhood kids who had achieved success, the families celebrating milestones, the community that had found a safe place, a sanctuary, in this small diner. A young woman, a law student, walked up to Dorothy's table. "Excuse me, Mrs. Washington?" "Yes, dear? My name is Sarah Carter. I'm studying civil rights law at the university. I just wanted to say, you are the reason I chose that field. You inspired me. You inspired me to fight hatred with dignity." Dorothy Washington smiled. It was the warmest smile in the world. She gestured to the empty seat in her booth. "Sit down, dear," she said. "Tell me about your family." As Sarah, the young bright-eyed student, began to share her story of immigrant parents, of financial struggles, of her dreams to protect other people, Dorothy saw herself. She saw herself reflected in another young person, a young person who was determined to make the world a more just and a more kind place. This was the real victory. It was not Sterling's imprisonment. It was the inspiration that Dorothy's courage had provided to the next generation, a generation that refused to accept injustice as inevitable. The Sterling case, it had created lasting change. Systems were reformed. Precedents were established. Hope was renewed. And Dorothy Washington, she continued to do what she had always done, believing in people's capacity for growth, fighting injustice with grace, and proving that the most revolutionary act of all is to simply refuse to let hatred make you hateful. Have you ever stood up for someone who couldn't stand up for themselves? Have you ever discovered that the quietest people often hold the most unexpected power? We want to hear your story. Share it in the comments below. If you believe that dignity will always defeat hatred, hit that like button. And please, subscribe to our channel. Subscribe for more stories where justice emerges from the most unlikely of sources, where ordinary people accomplish extraordinary things just by choosing hope over hate. Because you never ever know who might be watching when you choose to do what is kind. You never know whose life might be changed forever because you did what was right instead of what was easy. The story you heard today, it wasn't cleaned up. It was told exactly as it happened. Here, we believe that is the only way that truth can truly live. If you felt something, if this story touched you, hit like, comment with your reaction, and please, subscribe. We bring you voices that refuse to be silenced every single week. Thank you for watching.